Like so many of you, I first started a business as a side hustle while still working my full-time job. And one of the biggest mindset shifts I've had to make, even stepping now into full-time entrepreneurship, is to shift my mind into thinking more like an entrepreneur instead of an employee. Now, hear me on this. There's nothing wrong with being an employee. I'm just saying if you are committed to growing a business, it's really crucial that you develop the right mindset to support that goal. And it is a little bit different than the mindset you have when you are working for someone else. So today I'm going to break down the 3 biggest ways that I had to shift my own mindset from employee to entrepreneur that allowed me to create, I want you to hear this, I created as much in 1 month financially that I used to earn in a year. Welcome back to the podcast. We are going to talk about money this week. And we're talking about it in the context of your mindset. I love talking about money mindset. It's one of the topics we get requested for a podcast the most, but I'm going to talk about it in a little bit of a different way because we're doing this series that's really following along over the next 7 weeks total. We're now on week 3 of this series, really going back to the basics. And we are gearing up for the launch of our signature program called 6-Figure School. And one of the topics we talk about a lot in that program is your mindset around money. Because the reason we called the program 6-Figure School is that number and talking about money in general can sometimes make people feel uncomfortable. And if you are going to make the impact that you know you're meant to make and really have the business of your dreams, whether it's a 5-figure business, a 6-figure, a 7 or beyond figure business, you have to get really comfortable talking about money. And so today I'm going to share with you a few of the shifts that I had to make mentally, thinking more like an entrepreneur than an employee, that really made a difference in the financial success of my business. And again, like I said in the intro, there's nothing wrong with being an employee. In fact, businesses and entrepreneurs could not do their job if we didn't have people who felt so compelled to join the mission that they wanted to be a part of the team. So this is not a conversation of one is better than the other, but when you step into entrepreneurship, it's a different way of thinking. And there were some things that I realized took me a little time to shift in terms of my mentality. And when I did, I saw a huge change, a huge shift in the results that my business produced. So I'm going to break down the 3 of them for you, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. So I actually think regardless of which camp you find yourself in, if you are an employee and you just love this podcast, love talking about big ideas, I actually think there's some things you can take away from this too. And then those of you who are either side hustling or at the beginning stages of formulating your idea, or maybe you already have a successful business and you're looking to go to the next level, I think if you listen really closely, you're going to hear just one small shift. And a lot of times that's all it takes is one tiny shift in your mindset in order to open up a whole world of possibility. Okay, so when I thought about this, I had to really go back in time. So if you haven't heard my story, I took my first job right out of college in sales, moved to Arizona. I was originally from the Midwest. All I remember hearing was that this company was going to give me a car and a cell phone, and they were going to move me somewhere it didn't snow. So I took this job really feeling like it was the dream job. And it was shortly after that I ended up starting a business on the side. I lived the side hustle life and eventually took that business full time and then built Powerhouse Women, the end, right? So I've gone through all of these phases. And I really can see periods of time where I felt kind of stuck in growing my business. And it wasn't that I wasn't doing the right things. It wasn't that I wasn't working hard enough. Oftentimes I wanted to fix the problem by just working harder, but really it was a mindset shift that I needed to make. So I'm going to break down the 3 biggest mindset shifts that I can remember and even give you some of the context around what it looked like in my life when I was still really struggling with that mindset, because oftentimes these things are subtle. And again, I'm not saying that one mindset is better than the other. All I'm saying is if you're growing a business, there is a way to think that's going to support the kind of growth you want to create. So when I talk about employee versus entrepreneur mindset, I'm really talking about it in terms of this. I'm talking about it in terms of an entrepreneur being someone who's creating something from nothing, right? They're kind of that person who's got a vision and they're bringing something that didn't exist before into reality with the hope of making profit, making money from it. And then an employee is like the person who's supporting that vision, the person who is working under someone else's vision. And, whether that's hourly, salary, part-time, full-time, doesn't really matter. But when I think back to the time I've spent in both places, there's a very different way of thinking between the two. Okay, so the first way that I see for my story, there was a big difference and I had to make this shift, was the idea of, really seeing my time valued at a certain rate. So I was kind of trading time for money, whether it was even when I was working this salaried job, I had a set number of hours and I was paid a set amount for those. Or, back in the day when I used to work at Pier 1 Imports, like my high school job, I would work a certain number of hours, I would be paid for those hours. And I remember when I shifted to entrepreneurship, I remember someone showing me this graph. And it was really eye-opening. I still remember it to this day because in the beginning stages of entrepreneurship, you kind of feel like you're putting in a lot of time and not making a lot of money. At least that's most entrepreneurs that I know. So the bell curve doesn't start to trade off until you've really kind of put in the foundation. You've started to scale up to the point where eventually the goal is that you can have teams and systems and things in place where the business can continue to make money and you're not having to invest as much of your time in proportion to the amount you're earning. So it's really important to know that because in the beginning it can feel really discouraging when you are used to making a certain amount of money in your job, and then you're putting in all this work, and you're like, come on, somebody, is this ever going to pay off? And that's not the story for everybody, but at least it was for me, that I really had to see that the employee mindset was more like an expectation that when I invest this time and energy, there's a certain compensation for it. But the entrepreneur mindset was understanding this idea of creating leverage. And it takes a little while to build up to the point where you have that leverage on your time. So I think having that understanding from the beginning is so important so that you don't give up in the early stages when you might not be bringing in as much as you know that you eventually want to. But it takes some time to build the foundation, lay the groundwork in order to scale to where you know you want the business to be. So that was number one. And I remember that being so critical in those early stages of entrepreneurship for me. It's a big reason why I think a lot of times it can be easy to get stuck in the side hustle life because until the business scales more, it's hard to see. I just remember for myself, I was like, how is this business ever going to pay for my livelihood? Like, it's not doing much right now. So just know that every entrepreneur goes through that same transition. And eventually the goal is to start to see it more from the standpoint of creating leverage with your time, not having that expectation that like, okay, if you put in 10 hours of work this week, it's going to pay you a certain amount. Because if you continue to work when it doesn't feel like it's compensating you accordingly, eventually it can compensate you so generously because you spent the time and the years building the foundation. So the second one, where I had to shift my mindset from more of like the way I thought as an employee versus how I stepped into thinking like an entrepreneur was actually in setting my prices. So kind of a similar concept. We're kind of deepening this idea now of time being valued at a certain rate. And wherever we come up with that valuation, right? What, someone else has paid us, what our parents or someone else told us like a good hourly wage was, or then when we step into being the creator and offering our products and services, thinking that we're really only charging for the physical number of hours that went in to creating that product or service. So a question I hear a lot, especially within a community like our six-figure school group, is I'll get the question, okay, but what should I charge? Like, what's the right price to charge? And that's actually the wrong question to ask. We go deep into this like psychology of pricing and better questions to ask yourself. But here's the difference, I think, between shifting my mindset into more of an entrepreneur mindset. It's realizing that I'm not setting a price based on the physical number of hours I'm investing. So like I do a lot of business mentorship. So if I'm mentoring someone for an hour, I'm not just setting a price on that 1 hour of time. I'm actually setting the price based on the years that I've invested in myself, learned in my own business, had breakdowns and breakthroughs, the results I've gotten for other people that I've mentored. So we're setting prices based on the result that we're providing. And then obviously we have to back it up by being able to produce those results, but not necessarily the physical number of hours that we're exchanging in order to get that result. That was a huge shift for me, especially those of you who are more service providers or you want to go into a field like coaching or mentorship. I can never give you the exact answer of, okay, how much should I charge? But here's just a couple of tips as I've shifted into this entrepreneur mindset and really thought about the value that I'm bringing to the table, the result that I'm promising I'm going to help someone achieve. And then also just really starting to look at it from the standpoint of if I'm solving a problem, how valuable is it? How much value am I providing? And what is it adding to their life to have that problem solved? And then as I've grown in my own money mindset, in my own experience, of course, the prices have reflected accordingly. So don't get in your head too much about where to price things. My belief is that the price that you're charging, especially for your services or your time, should stretch the person you're supporting, the person you're helping, and it also should stretch you a little bit. It should have you show up as your highest self. It should be a number that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, but it really has you show up in a way that you need to show up in order to deliver the result that you're promising. Okay, and the third mindset shift, and this one really I can see so clearly how I used to think more when I was an employee versus an entrepreneur, is this whole distinction between spending and investing. And maybe this is also biased by the fact that I kind of grew up in a household where like we stretched every dollar. Like we got our teeth cleaned at the dental school. We got our haircuts at the, beauty school. We just made the most out of everything. So I definitely had some money fears and stories to overcome. But specifically when it came to spending money, a lot of what I had to shift for myself was this fear. Fear number one around spending money to outsource, hire help, have someone take on a task, and then really just this reluctance to give up control of certain things. So whether that was showing up in the way of like, oh, that's easy, I can just do it really quick, or I don't know if I trust someone to do it as well as I could do it. Switching my mindset to, again, that conversation of leverage. How do I leverage my time? How do I produce the best end result that we can possibly produce? And do I need to be doing every single task? So that was one area where the shift from spending money to investing in buying back my time, investing in getting the best possible person in that role so we could serve in a bigger way. that shift really opened up a whole new level of abundance for our business. And then the other place where this whole spend versus invest conversation showed up was when investing in myself. And a lot of times, I talk with a lot of women about mentorship. You've probably heard me talk about it a lot on the podcast. And a lot of times people, they want that certainty, that guarantee of, okay, what's the return on my investment? And yes, like when you're investing, you are looking for a return. That's like the inherent meaning of the word invest. And oftentimes the investment and the return I got on it when it comes to a mentoring situation is so different and so far beyond what I went in expecting that if I had held on to my original expectation, okay, if I invest this $2,000 in a book writing program, that was my first big investment in myself, then I better get X, Y, and Z result. I better sell this many copies and I better make it up. But like if I had stood from that mindset when I first wrote my book and I invested in a program to help me do that, I would have been focusing on the wrong thing. I would have been focusing so minutely on one place that I could get a return versus what ended up happening, which is this entire community, this podcast, everything we've created from that point forward, because that return on the investment has been probably like 100-fold. But if I were looking at just the book sales, like if I do this, I better get this money back in terms of books sold. You guys, no one writes a book to become a millionaire. I mean, some people probably make a lot of money selling books, but I think the last royalty that I got for book sales was like, no joke, $6. So, it probably hasn't even, the book itself paid for that investment, but what I went on and created as a result has come back, like I said, probably 100-fold, if not more. So I want you to just be honest with yourself. Where are you seeing that maybe there's some mindset shifts that could support you to create the next level kind of results that you want to create in your business? Where do you have hidden fears around money or just old lingering thought patterns that maybe it is more from an employee mindset if you came from that world? I want you to honestly take a look because I believe that so much of the growth we want to experience, the results we want to achieve, aren't necessarily, like I started out by saying, going to come from just working harder or doing more. Oftentimes, it's these subtle shifts in our mindset that can make all the difference. So one of the things that has really helped me when it comes to not just making these shifts, but reinforcing them, because you can have the awareness and make the mindset shift, but then if you're not reinforcing it and feeding that new mindset, it's really easy to slip back into old ways of thinking. This conversation is such a big topic for those of you that are pursuing big ideas and your own business that it's one of the main reasons we created the Girl Gang membership community. I get so many requests to bring in speakers on this topic, to bring back the connection calls that everyone loved back in 2020. And this is the place where we are doing exactly that. We're going to spend an entire month talking about money mindset. So if you loved today's conversation, you're definitely going to want to plug in at powerhousegirlgang.com. This is the place where our motto in Powerhouse Women, where you're not meant to do business or life alone, that motto gets to come to life. So you get exclusive content, connection calls every month, and action steps to keep you moving forward toward your big ideas. I cannot wait to meet you in this community. You can go right now to powerhousegirlgang.com and it's only $1 to join. So we also wanted to create a place where you could join and take that first baby step toward investing in yourself. You can join for $1, try it out, feel it out, and then of course we want you to stay, and it's just $25 a month after that. But this is going to be such a fun place. The conversations happening in this community already are blowing me away, and the connections being made, the support, the encouragement and accountability, it's just the best. It's like, I'm very biased, but it's my favorite place to hang out. So I would love to meet you over at powerhousegirlgang.com. That's where you get signed up. You can officially join the Girl Gang, and stay tuned because next week we're continuing this series, going back to basics and really looking at where can you make small shifts in your mindset, in your business to make an even bigger impact.